welcome all to this momentous occasion. On behalf of Miami-Dade College and the Koubek Center, I welcome you. My name is Ricardo Pau-Llosa. I'm a professor here at Miami-Dade College and a writer and a longtime friend and admirer of Aurelio Vega. This wonderful film by Camilo Vila, which we are about to see in premiere, it's titled Aurelio, Rebel with a Cause. It's a very apt title. The genuine artist is always a rebel, but often we think that just because someone is an artist, they are automatically rebels. But that isn't always the case. The history of the last 100+ years have shown that a great many people who are accomplished, brilliant, gifted, talented artists have often put themselves at the service of injustices and tyrannical regimes that have offered them patronage and support in all sorts of direct and indirect ways. Aurelio Vega is a genuine rebel in the sense that he embodies that condition of the supremely ethical and moral individual who not only defends art just by his composition and by his work as an artist, but in terms of also his positions on these same injustices. The artist, to be a rebel, has to be a defender of freedom, unequivocally and without condition. And that Aurelio Vega has always been. And it's a doubly special honor to have him as a friend and to have him here with us today. Afterward, we're going to bring up, I'll be joining Aurelio and Camilo Vila for a question and answer session on the film. And we'll have plenty of opportunity to ask them both about the process of creating this film. It's a particularly difficult kind of process to produce a documentary on an artist, I would say, because we bump into that great paradox that the artist really represents the transcendence of personality through his or her work. The artist is in that sense, the ultimate rebellion of the artist is the transcendence of the ego. But at the same time, we are fascinated by and very interested, and rightly so, in the conditions of life of the artist and what compelled that individual to create what he or she did, and how that work responds to the conditions of life. The artwork is always both universal and very specific. I hate to use the word regional, but for lack of another one. There is no more English writer, let's say, than Shakespeare, and no more universal one. And this same paradox influences and determines our view of every great artist, and that will, of course, include Aurelio Vega. So, without further ado, I want to welcome you again to the world of Aurelio Vega, as presented by Camilo Vila. And I also ask you, please, to shut the phones or silence them. One time I asked that of an audience, and my own phone went off at that same time. So people immediately put their phones back on, as if saying, oh yeah? Well, we'll show you, guy at the podium. So anyway, thank you again, and enjoy this wonderful film. So, Camilo, I want to congratulate you on a wonderful film, really. It's beautiful.
If you give me the opportunity, I'm sorry, but I have to say this. As you all know, filmmaking is a group effort, and there's some people I have to mention because I went to military school in Cuba, in Havana Military Academy, and when an officer called you, you went like this, you said, "Aquí presente, señor." Well, when I called a few people for this project, they came and said, "Aquí presente, señor." Well, let me start with the cinematographer. I don't know where he is, Henry Vargas, who's my partner in crime in every, we've been working.
What is Henry?
I don't know where Henry is, but he's here somewhere. Since 16, we've done so many features, commercials, all kinds of stuff. I have to mention also, he's not here because he had some family emergency, Dr. Eduardo Palmer, who since the beginning of my career, he's always said, aquí presente, señor. And then my mentor, and I'm sorry for being so, for my French, but he taught me how to castrate bulls, is Orlando Jimenez Leal, who he's always, and then people like Adalberto, who's here, who's from the beginning came in, and Norman Smith, and so all those people. So thank you, everybody. And most of all, please, Mario Berenstein and the Miami-Dade College, because we're all here because of him. Sorry.
Okay, I was wondering if there were any questions or comments from the audience, since
Well, before we go into that, I want to thank also Miami-Dade County.
Okay.
I want to thank Mario Berenstein, who has put on this magnificent gathering here. I want to thank Ricardo Pau-Llosa, who is not only a friend, but it happens to be a very intelligent man, which is a rare thing sometimes. And it's always very agreeable to talk with him, to be in his presence, to dialogue with him, to discuss with him, and so forth. And to Camilo, an old friend too, that when this idea started, jumped into the thing tremendously. I mean, I cannot tell you how grateful I am to him, because this is a labor of love, what he has done. And what all the people that have been involved in the production of this documentary is a labor of love. This is not a labor of money, it's a labor of love. Now, we need money to underline love sometimes, but it is mainly the other thing around. It's a matter of conviction, of friendship, of care for the future of Cuba. Because believe me, my friends, what is in this documentary is not only me. I mean, I am happening to be a composer that writes music, that hopes to leave something for Cuba in the future. Not today, tomorrow, when things are in the proper place. Now, the rebellion of mine is a personal conviction, and you pay dearly for it. You know, I pay dearly in the Cuban society, which need not understand this music, who does not understand it today. And I paid it dearly, of course, in the political spectrum. You know, when you lose your country for whatever you know, it's not an easy thing, because then you do not belong to anything anymore, except 20 friends that understand you. You cannot go back because it doesn't exist. He's like the guy who thinks he's in Egyptian times, you know, and dressed like a pharaoh and puts a pyramid in the garden and thinks he's there. No, he's not there. And also the fact that, that all these elements which are conspiring against your legacy are still present. And I don't care. I always say, in a way, do you like my music? You don't? Have a cup of coffee. So now we can go into questions if you want.
Yeah, as a musician, I would like to thank the composer, Vega, for having given us incredible music. My name is Ariel Ramos Jr., and my father and I used to listen to his music very passionately. He approached it a little bit more intellectually. I approached it more as a musician, and it's a work of art that will go for eons and eons, and it's fascinating, and one of the greatest composers that Cuba has given. And I'd like to commend the filmmaker for such incredible editing, the way that you and your group, what you did with the editing, in just a short amount of time, the information that was given us, and the music that you put was really fantastic. It was quality in just a matter of 60 or 90 minutes, whatever it was. So I'd like
you're a very lucky guy to have had a father like Ariel. He was a wonderful, wonderful man.
Voy a hablar en español para el beneficio de un cineasta cubano que está aquí. The English is not very good.
Aquí hay alguien que no hable español. Okay, I'll translate. Or you translate. No, dilo en español.
I'll translate afterward. Go ahead.
Primero quiero felicitar, I want to congratulate Camilo por una joyita, Arturo, beautiful, style, gorgeous, y por supuesto Aurelio por su música. I want to know what was the seed that started the project. ¿Cuál fue la semilla que empezó el proyecto? Siempre hay algo, the spark that goes to the back.
Bueno, es una combinación de dos cosas. Primero, yo tenía un proyecto que nunca lo pude llevar a cabo, que era, yo quería hacer biografía de cubanos, pero no necesariamente artistas o inclusive yo quería hacer cubanos de negocios, gente que han triunfado, porque yo tengo una opinión, no sé si la van a compartir conmigo. Los cubanos triunfaron en el exilio no porque seamos más inteligentes o porque no la sabemos todas o somos más. Yo creo que son tres razones que triunfamos. Una gran ética de trabajo, una gran, muy fuerte institución de la familia, y vinimos a un país en aquel entonces donde había total libertad económica. Entonces, cuando tú reúnes esas tres cosas, no puedes fallar. Entonces, yo creo que las futuras generaciones de Cuba, ya sea las de allá, que solo han oído que del lado de acá somos la mafia, que somos el batistiano, que somos horribles, como las de acá, yo quería que esa ética, eso pasara al futuro, que la gente supiera que en Cuba, porque si Cuba ha triunfado siempre, ya sea antes de Fidel y después Fidel, ha sido en el plano privado, porque nuestros gobiernos dejan mucho que desear. Pero en el plano, desde las clínicas de Cuba, de todas las instituciones, Cuba estaba llena de palacios donde iban gente de uniones, inmigrantes. No era de una aristocracia esos palacios. Y yo quería pasar eso, pero desgraciadamente nunca tuve el apoyo económico para hacerlo. Entonces ahora voy a la segunda parte. Aurelio era, como él dijo, éramos amigos, y para mí Aurelio como persona, olvídense un momento de su obra, es un hombre tan especial, es único, es una persona que rompieron el molde con él. Y yo dije para mí, sí, mira, una de las cosas, por ejemplo, si tú conoces la música de él, tú dices, tú nunca vas a pensar que es un hombre de un gran sentido del humor, que con él se puede chotear hasta el final. Yo, claro, ahora como lo conozco a él, encuentro el humor en su música. Pero si yo no lo hubiera conocido, eso me hubiera pasado por arriba el humor de él. Entonces yo decía, este hombre va a dejar una obra ahí, que eso va a estar. Pero ¿quién fue él? ¿Quién fue? ¿Quién lo conoció? ¿Quién sabe quién era el hombre detrás de esa música? Nosotros no sabemos quién fue Mozart, no sabemos quién fue Beethoven, pero sí sabemos quién fue Picasso, ¿no? Entonces, eso fue lo que me motivó a mí, y entonces, como dije anteriormente, Henry, yo le hablé a Henry y me dijo inmediatamente, let's do it, let's do it. Le dije, aquí no hay dinero, y al Alberto y todos los que se sumaron, yo dije, aquí no hay un centavo, porque desgraciadamente nadie pone dinero para estas cosas, pero lo tuvimos que hacer con nuestro propio esfuerzo, y esa fue la motivación. Yo no traté de hacer un estudio de su música, primero no estoy capacitado para hacer eso, no traté de hacer una biografía, traté de exponer la relación de un artista con la sociedad que le tocó vivir.
Necesitamos más preguntas para poder llenar el tiempo aquí.
Aquí hay una. Bueno.
Well, by respect, I mean, you know, there are two kinds of people in this planet. There are some kind of people that do not understand something, and they think it's important, and therefore respect it that way. There are some other people that laugh about it, you know, they react, you know, very often laugh, as you know, is a defense. You know, many people laugh because they don't understand something. Many people laugh because it's a strange equation that they don't get it. And instead of saying, let me learn it, or let me maybe ignore it even, they laugh, you know. Now, the only thing that I say in regard to respect is that respect is a very good thing, because you eventually might open the door. If you don't have respect, you will never open the door. And the door opening is very good because it's beautiful to know more and more and more about things. He's like the guy that goes on top of a mountain, you know, and climbs without oxygen, and it's a tremendous journey. But then when he arrives at the top, it's a wonderful elation. It's a wonderful feeling of contemplating things that he never saw before. And the open mind is very important. Sometimes we do not have an open mind. And we sometimes criticize things without knowing what we are criticizing and so forth. So I think respect is an element that is very important to enjoy something. Now, it could be that you never enjoy it. You know, it could be that the language was very difficult, you know, I mean, you cannot learn Chinese tomorrow, and therefore but you cannot say Chinese doesn't exist, you know, or Chinese is wrong, you know. No, Chinese is there, you didn't get it, go ahead, you know. And with this type of music, which simply is, you know, what is the difference? I always ask, what is the difference between popular music, for example, that all of you enjoy, I'm sure, myself too. I like to move the hips too. But at a given moment, you know, I mean, you move the hips at a given moment. You don't go to the beach, you know, on tails, and you don't go to in a concert in underwear, no? So everything has a place, you know. And the idea is that you transcend the popular music, which is very simple, as you know. It consists of a theme repeated 300 times. Why do you think it repeated 300 times? Because the composer knows that the human ear is very poor. And he's telling you, idiot, you don't still get it, here it is again, you know? Now, that's one way of creating. They are creating for enormous amount of people. They are creating for money very often, because it's the only lucrative part of music that you find. And then there is another side in which suddenly you think, oh, I am not interested in that, and I'm interested in creating something that goes beyond that and that stays, hopefully, in history somehow, you know? I'm sure that when Beethoven was writing a string quartet, he was not thinking of moving the hips. You know, he was thinking of creating a great piece of art that was unique, you know, and it still is there. And I think that the human spirit is one of the great things of the human spirit is as creativity. When they ask me, you know, I mean, isn't the Grand Canyon beautiful? I say, yes, it's a beautiful whole, but it's a whole, you know? I'm not respectful of the whole. You know what I am respectful of? I am respectful about the Verdi Requiem, because that's a human being that out of nothing created a masterpiece. And that's what is amazing, you know? The other thing is an accident, very beautiful accident, but thank you so much. So respect is important in the equation of enjoying something, undoubtedly.
You don't believe in God? It was a joke. It was a joke. Esto demuestra que yo puedo bromear con él.
What a statement, you know. That's a very grave thing, my friend.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, eventually it will. I mean, again, we did a DVD, which, by the way, I'm not trying to sell or this is a plug, you know. The DVD has a lot of the outtakes. It has a wonderful him speaking, talking a lot about music, the history of music, which is wonderful. Yes, but there's so much we could do. Again, it goes back to funds. Actually, somebody said to me yesterday that she loved the documentary, but she felt it was a little too short, that I could have done another 20 minutes, which I immediately said, I totally agree. But there was a point where I'm working with people that are doing this for free, you know, and there's a point where I have to say, I can't keep going. I have to end it. Maybe it's not finished, but I have to end it. We were involved in the editing, I don't know, at least a year, right? Not that we worked all the time, because we would get jobs, we would leave it and then come back to it. But there's a point where I just can't say, you know what, let's put 20 more minutes into I couldn't, so it comes back to funds. Unfortunately, filmmaking is a very expensive endeavor. I mean, enterprise. It's very expensive. It's not, I think with the little money that we did this, we did wonders. Well, actually, she was the one that told me about the 20 minutes.
That is why I want to ask some questions from Aurelio. On private with some discussions in the 50s, that in Cuba there was a lot for things ballet, ballet in the 50s, Alicia Alonso and all that. And I was one of them, and I had a teacher in school for choral, and I had the privilege to hold the hands of Igor Stravinsky, because she would take us to the auditorium. But I recall that in those days you defended German music, and I also had the privilege of being in his house, as I sort of confessed in the article this morning. So I would like to go further into that idea of why did you go into the German composers versus Stravinsky, who was so famous at the time, especially collaborating with Balanchine, and that you also had done some work on his piece.
Well, that's very interesting question, but I will answer quickly. I was a young man, let's say 13 or 14, or something like that at the time. And Cuba was influenced mainly by Spanish culture, undoubtedly. And in the realm of music, also that was prevalent. I'm talking about classical music, Although the popular music is also inheritance from Spain, it's a mixture of Spanish things and African things. And at that time, Cuba is very influenced by Spanish things and also by French in a way, Suddenly I became interested in German things because I started reading, whatever. I discovered Wagner, I came into contact with philosophy and so forth. And I became fascinated by that world much more than the other one. First of all, because it was structurally much more magnificent and complex. It gave me some dimensions that I didn't find in the other one. It had a discipline that was absolutely astounding. And it was very, very avant-garde, Remember that the great revolutions in music in Europe occur in the German orbit. I mean, when you consider 1902 or 1903 or 1904, and Arnold Schoenberg is believing in a new language of atonality and so forth, and this and that. This is major revolutionary thing. And I became very interested in that situation and started, looking and looking and looking. I had a professor, my instructor, my mentor at that moment was a Viennese composer by the name of Fritz Kramer. I'm talking now about 1939, for example. And this man brought me a collection of music that I never knew before. This is the first time I hear Mahler's symphonies. This is the first time that I know who Bruckner is, who Alban Berg is, who Schoenberg is. In Cuba, these were unknown names. I mean, if you talk at the people at the musicians, I'm talking about musicians. Stravinsky was the idol, but if you talk about atonality and total system and all that, they didn't know what it was all about. And I discovered this world, and I found it tremendously fascinating. You know how those things are. It's like sometimes you get involved with a woman that you adore, and that's it. You have suddenly connected with this human being instead of with another one. So I connected with the German world, and I was very fascinated by it, and I wrote music that was in that orbit, and everyone thought that I was coming from Mars, which is a nice planet, by the way.
You also participated in the philosophical
That's right, yeah.
that Virgilio Piñera's brother,
That's right.
Alberto Piñera, started the Society of Philosophy,
Yes,
and we all went there all through the 50s.
that's right.
And you were there too. And one of the persons that studied was Heidegger.
That's right.
So you're referring to those philosophers as well?
Of course, of course, of course. And you know, history is always so peculiar and so dangerous sometimes, you know, when there are big cataclysms like the wars and things, you know, and suddenly you classify things in one way or the other. The Germans are all horrible. I mean, this is idiotic, you know, and we are the good ones and these are the bad ones, you know, and suddenly you include the art, you know, which is something horrendous. I mean, this idea, in one of the extras in the DVD, there is a moment which I'm talking alone, and I ended with this little phrase. You know, I said, one of the things that is very sad of our time is the lack of reasoning. You know, there is no reasoning anymore. People don't dialogue. People scream. You know, and it's a world of masses. You know, masses are the ones that communicate the things. You bring to a politician 20 people, the secretary opens the door. You bring 200, the guy comes out. You bring 3,000, and where do I sign? You know, which is an amazing thing. We are not talking about ideas, we are talking about numbers, you know, or whatever. And in this respect, you know, when we come back to the question, is the fact that in these big upheavals, you distort everything. And the last phrase I said is, in this crazy moment that we live in, for example, you have the division of religion and state. Religion and state should be separated, which I think is an interesting idea. But then when it comes to art, art should not be separated from politics. It should be at the service of, which I think is horrendous, you know. Art is a magnificent independent thing by itself, and the minute it becomes politicized, it's very negative. One of the things that I am sad about the situation that we go in Cuba, you know, so forth, is the fact that art is politicized, you know. When you look at the paintings of coming out of Cuba today, 80% of the things is always tinted with that. It's a pro or a con, you know, it's a pancartic thing, you know, which is not a liberty situation. It's not that the painter is painting a piece of colors and forms and things in a canvas. It's a statement, you know, that I had to do. And those things are very dangerous. I'm not interested in those statements. Now, do you think I believe in God? Yes.
I attended a conference that you're having in New York about a year ago, and you mentioned your relationship with Schoenberg.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was very interesting. And I have two questions. One is about your relationship with Schoenberg, and the second one is about your relationship with Nicolas Quintana, who was your friend since you were good boys, 5-year-old, 6-year-old. Mention something about that.
Well, the relation with Schoenberg was a musical relation, of course. I mean, I admired tremendously that man, mainly in my youth. You know, later on, some changes in your perception appear, you know, how things are. I'm not saying that I'm putting him the man down, not like that. But this tremendous obsession that I had with him at that time, which was based precisely in the revolutionary character of the music that he wrote. I thought it was incredible. It was a new language. It was a new dimension. You know, it was a statement, both artistically from a point of view of music and from the point of view of philosophy too. You know, it was a very big world in front of me. And I came when I was 21, exclusively from Havana, to study with him, with a letter with Erich Kleiber. The relationship personally was not a felicitous one. It was a very difficult one. And this is another story that one day we will talk about, maybe. But my admiration for the man remains totally and completely. I didn't, you know, got into his, shall we say, patronage for so many reasons. And we didn't work together beyond 3 months in reality of relationship. Physically, I mean, in the presence of the master. But the admiration remains, and he's one of the great figures of music. Now, in relation to Nicolas, who was my co-disciple in the school, you know, I studied in La Salle school, and Nicolas was in the same course that I was. And he didn't live very far from my house, so we started communicating at that time as friends, young friends. And then, you know, things happened. I came to the United States. You know, I have lived more in the United States than in Cuba. This is amazing. You know, it's unbelievable. And these things are part of the tragic histories of sometimes of us individuals. If I add the years I studied here, the years I lectured here, the years I stayed in 57 and 58, because the university was closed, and then they called me back they called me back in 59, and I told my wife, I said, I knew him from the university, of course, and I said, I don't think that I'm going to like this. So I signed a contract with the American University before leaving, which was genial. And I arrived in Havana February 17th of 1959. And I came down the stairs of the airplane and I saw this enormous mass of barbudos with machine guns and bullets all around them. And I say, well, thank you so much, bye-bye. And when I add all those years, I am here more than there. But anyway, coming back to Nicolas. I lost track of Nicolas, you know, for probably 30 years or 40 years, you know. He became a very famous architect. In Cuba, of course, I already saw some of the things that he had done, because Nicolas was one of the architects in Cuba that looked to the future, too. Remember that architecture in the Republic in the 50s. The 50s, my friends, some of you knew it, some of you have heard about it. The 50s in Cuba, and this is another thing that we have to correct history, because the gentlemen we have there say that they brought culture to Cuba, and everything happened after they appeared, like the Holy Ghost descending from heaven, you know. And that was not true. Cuba was a fantastic place in many ways, and if they would have been left alone, it would have been incredible, I'm sure of that. But Havana in the 50s was Paris and New York combined in a way, you know, and I was there and I can testify for that. So in that respect, the architecture in Cuba was fabulous, fabulous. It was superior to the American architecture at that moment, you know. And the legacy of those architects that left those things in Cuba is forever there, you know, definitely. But we lost contact with Nicolas, and I remember that it was, whatever, probably 20 years ago, something like that, or 15, no, 20 years ago. It happens that it was an act in a museum in Los Angeles in relation to Fernando Ortiz, you know, legacy and so forth, and Nicolas appeared because he had been friends with Fernando Ortiz very closely. And he spoke and he presented points of views, and suddenly I see this man, you know, that I had left 45 years before, and it was amazing, it was magical, it was like if I had seen him the previous day, you know. Those things that happen, that's one of the things that are good about the Cubans. There are many things that are bad, but those are good. The fact that we can communicate immediately, you know, as human beings, and the time element disappears, and suddenly Nicolas and I became again very close friends. And I kept admiring precisely his structural ideas, his concept of architecture, which transcended, you know, the fact that this is a room for eating and this is a room for going to the bathroom. It was a little more elevated than that. And he enjoyed my music, you know, for the same reason. And we kept this friendship and this admiration until, unfortunately, he passed away. And my memory and my admiration is always present for him.
Can I say something? And Aurelio knows this. I am so sad that me or anybody else, it didn't have to be me, but that there was not a documentary like this about Nicolas Quintana. And I'm going to throw in a third name, Carlos Ripoll. It's not a coincidence that all three of them grew up since they were 5 years old. They went to school from the very beginning, and they know each other from the very beginning. And all three not only were icons in their fields, they also had a incredible personality. I mean, Nicolas, he was such a sweet guy, and such the way he gave lectures about the history of the architecture of Cuba, besides being himself an incredible architect. I mean, it's a shame that we didn't get to do a documentary about him, And like I said, I want to throw a third name who also knows Aurelio since he was 5. He sent me, it's Carlos Ripoll. I tried to get him. By that time, he was having a lot of problems with his wife. And he sent me a letter, such a beautiful letter that I wish I could have put it in the documentary. And about a vision, again, no money to reproduce it, but a vision he had of Aurelio when the chauffeur used to pick him up, and he would sit underneath this huge painting of
Saint Teresa.
Saint Teresa, and in this old kind of Spanish architecture kind of thing. I wanted to reproduce that, but I just didn't have the funds to do it. And so anyway, I want to add that to that. Nicolas Quintana is I wish me or anybody else would have done something like this about him.
Well, I think what you should do, because I might disappear before that. Remember that in a few months I'm going to be 90, imagine, you know? It's like if I am a dinosaur or something. I think that Camilo has to do a documentary in the future, whenever possible, when the funds appear, whatever. Nicolas Quintana has to be there. Carlos Ripoll has to be there. Ricardo Pau-Llosa has to be there. These are very important documentaries. Really, I'm serious about it. You know, I always tell people, tell me one thing. Who was the mayor of Amsterdam in 1882? You remember him? No. But you remember Van Gogh. Do you remember who was the chief of the army in the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1813? Who was a very powerful man, you know, was all over the place and so forth. No. You remember Beethoven who was there. And you go down the list, and it's like that, you know? And all those politicians and so forth and this and that, thank you so much, goodbye. Who remains is Quintana, and who remains is this guy, and who remains is Ripoll, and who remains is Martí, and so forth. And Martí remains not because he was only the liberator, but because he was a great poet. And we must remember that. And the community, the Cuban community, has to remember that. You know, sometimes this is a very touchy subject. It's a very touchy subject, you know. You know, people from Herencia, for example, the cultural Herencia is also working, you know, towards this, and is fighting for these funds and so forth. Sometimes, some Cubans, which have been very successful as entrepreneurs and so forth, they tell me, you know, we are the Jewish people of America. And I say, bullshit. You know why? Because you have been successful in this monetary world and in your business and so forth, but you're not a very given people for culture. You know, the Jewish give money for the Philharmonic, for the opera, for the ballet, for the building, for this and for that. And I want to see that. So don't tell me that we are the Jewish of America.
I think Mario wants to say something, and I don't think it's a question. Okay, there's one real quick question. Bueno, real quick.
Master, are you completely satisfied with your legacy to the present generation and the future generation, or you have some regrets about
What do you mean by that? If I'm pleased with what I have done?
your legacy as a composer?
No, look, when you look towards the future always, and I adore the past, you know, but the past is a fact that is frozen. I'm not interested in talking musically like if I am in Chopin's time, because it's impossible for me, you know. If you are one of these people that think that the music stops with Chopin or Johann Strauss or whatever, it's something weird, because you come in a Cadillac or in a car that has a push button, you know, and it comes automatically, and you turn the lights and this and that and the little phone and so forth. This is incongruous, you know. You should come, if you love that music only and that's a real thing, you should come in a horse, you should have a candle in your place, and you should destroy your phones. So in that respect, I love the future, not the past as a real thing. Now you do your thing, whatever, you know, you leave your legacy. My legacy is, 82 works of music. Everything I have written except opera, fortunately. I never did that. I never had the time or whatever. And that's it. You leave it there. Now, you have the aspiration somehow that this has a meaning in history, you know, and that this will mean something for future generations or whatever. If 3 people like it, wonderful. If 10,000 people like it, wonderfully. I don't think that it's completely closed, you know, that, you know, this music is not even loved by, no. I have many people that enjoy it, that know what it means. And it's there, and as we said before, you know, the future of our lost country will be there one day, somehow, you know. It will evolve, who knows into what, but it will be there. And when peace comes and when reason comes, you know, someone will enjoy this music, whatever. I don't have regrets.
Real quick, I think we have to leave.
First of all, I want to congratulate you for this wonderful documentary, which shows us the extraordinary dimensions of this Cuban composer we have in front, whom I had the pleasure of meeting him many years ago in LA. He went to my concert like almost 30 years ago with Octavio Costa, and I have great respect for you and the other composers like Julián Borbón.
Yes, yes.
And, of course, and some others that are not so well known, like Natalio Galan.
Exactly, yes, yes.
So many others that have had the decency of coming here and doing their lives, their work, and all that. I really, when I arrived, I had 3 little children, little girls. It was very hard for me. You gave me your piece, Sound Clouds, which I have. I promise, and I will, because I play some Cuban composers. I play Borbón, some of the Cuban contemporary composers, and I promise that I will play your piece soon.
Very good.
What is your name?
Yeah, yeah. Carlos, do it quickly because remember,
Time is short, like we have to leave, I think, right?
thank you so much. It was a great pleasure being with you.
Thank you.
All right.